Hello, everyone, and welcome to Real Estate Right Now. We talk about real estate matters that matter to you. My name is Jay Izzo, and we are live here from Linden Craft Team Studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina, part of the Greater Research Triangle Park. Today's show, do-it-yourself commercial real estate? Question mark? Well, think again. One of the issues that people always think is, well, I can do commercial real estate on my own. I can make my own leases. I can make my own purchases. I don't need to hire a commercial broker. And there are dangers if you decide to go that route. A lot of dangers, unsuspected traps, unsuspected things that can happen that you weren't counting on because you didn't know the details. So what did I do today? Well, I brought him back, Baxter Walker, Principal Avison Young. Welcome back, Baxter.
Oh, thank you. Good to be here.
And we have people, I've known them, and they'll say, I want to open up my own store or my own little bakery or whatever. I'm just going to go do this whole commercial thing on my own. And I know you've known this too. You've been in this business a long time.
Sure.
And so people will think that, well, how hard can it be? I just sign I like it. It looks good. I'll sign the contract and I'm done. But there's more ins and outs to this game of commercial real estate than what people really understand. So let's start with, doing a lease. Say, I'm going to either get a retail space or maybe I want to open up my bakery or whatever it may be. And you're trying to do this on your own. And I think I'm just going to walk in and sign a contract on a lease. What does a commercial broker like you, if you're representing the buyer, what are you looking for to help them navigate those waters?
Sure. Well, first off, Jay, thank you. I'm honored to be here. So we approach leasing, and one of the fundamental dynamics between commercial and residential, looking for a commercial business is this is a permanent solution. They are going to build this business to grow for many years to come and maybe sell the business at some point. Whereas residential on average, 7 years, moving a house. So it's as family transitions. So it is a permanent, long-standing solution. So as we're looking at opportunities, one of the most fundamental scenarios are there are 3 different lease arrangements.
Okay.
That are out there. So there's your full service lease, which is typically in a large office building, multi-tenant office building, Class A building. There's a triple net lease, which you usually see in retail spaces and industrial spaces. And then there's kind of a modified gross in the middle. And part of the reason I bring that up is if someone on their own, they're looking on LoopNet or looking wherever, it doesn't show that. It might say $26 a square foot per year for one property. And then on another one, it says $25 per square foot year, triple net, NNN. Well, that looks better. I'll do that. Well, that triple net means there might be a $5 or $6 or $7 or $10 part on top of that. So it's just the dynamics of the terminology. So working through that is what's critical of just general understanding of the terminology and just what it is. And working through that is just making sure they're protected.
Okay. So you threw out some terms here that, I think the person who wants to do it yourself commercial real estate, don't do it. Well, you just threw out a term triple net, and then you said gross. And then you said, okay, so now there's some terminology here. So help people understand, what does triple net mean?
Okay. So like typically in a retail or an industrial space, you're paying your base rate, which is a per year, per square foot rate. And on top of that is the triple net, which is TICAM, another acronym. We love our acronyms, and which is the taxes for the property, the insurance, property insurance, and the common area maintenance. So it's any of those charges that are not specific to that tenant.
Okay.
It could be a common dumpster, it's landscaping, it's common lighting, it's snow removal. It's just all the common costs that a landlord's going to incur, passes that through to the tenant. So as we all know, particularly in this region, the taxes, mainly due to property values, jumped quite a bit.
Right.
So many properties, TICAMs went up quite a bit in 2025 because of that. So I was having a lot of conversations in front of this with tenants that I put in spaces before that, and they were aware. They knew that these things come, but I still reach out to them and just give them a heads up that this is just the case. This is just the cost of doing business in that type of property. So with that, the way the TICAM works is it's very similar to like escrow, like for that you have in a mortgage payment of your insurance. It's kind of estimated. So it's estimated for the current year, and then what happens in the first quarter of the following year, it's reconciled based on the past year's expenses. The tenant will get I jokingly call it an estrogram, but they'll get something. Okay, you owe us this to get squared up. Your upcoming year TICAM has been adjusted to this. So it's just preparing for that. And so when I work with tenants that are in those type of arrangements, whenever they get that, I say, just send it to me. Let me review it. Let me make sure it's right. Usually it is, but every now and then there's a mistake. Make sure it's right, and then we move forward. So that is a fundamental thing. So moving over to full service, which is the other, you could call it the other extreme. The TICAM, we refer to it more as OPEX, operating expenses in that scenario. And this could be like buildings you see in downtown Raleigh, or just a large building with common lobbies. That's included in the number that's presented. Now, there is still a pass-through oftentimes where if those operating expenses increase, those can get passed through to the tenant. Another catch-all that just surprises some folks if they do this on their own. Then you have that hybrid in the middle, which is modified gross. You see this typically in office condos or things like that, where it's broken down. I don't want to say simpler, that's not the right word, but it's just broken down a little bit differently, where there's just one number. There's typically not a pass-through, and the tenants are paying their own utilities. If they have their own electrical, they're paying their janitorial, they're paying it themselves. So that's usually like an office condo type of situation. So much of it, Jay, just really depends on the type of property and all of those. Now, oftentimes we'll try to negotiate some caps on the TICAM, but typically how that falls out is anything that's controllable, basically anything that goes out for bid. Taxes usually don't get capped because even though you can appeal it, there's, it's still typically don't get capped. Same thing with insurance.
So let me make sure that the audience understands and we're clear together.
Sure.
So when we say triple net, what I'm actually doing is, let's just keep numbers simple, $25 a square foot. Let's say it's 1,000 square foot space, and then it says triple net. So what I'm paying when it's triple net, I am paying my portion of the taxes. I'm paying my portion of the utilities based on my size of my space, I'm guessing, right?
Prorated, correct.
Prorated, right? And my portion.
Right.
And any other like shared amenities or costs such as snow removal or the trash can or whatever, right?
Sure.
Is that a pretty accurate, fair, simplified statement of saying when we see triple net, this just means that, okay, you're paying $25 a square foot plus the triple net, whatever that may be, prorated over the course. So if it's done by the year. So if you buy it in June, you've got 6 months prorated the 6 months, but you start in January, it's going to be the whole year.
Yeah,
is that a fair?
Yeah, so they'll adjust it each calendar. That's on the calendar year.
Okay.
Now your base lease rate, we typically see in this market 3% bumps, which is a 30-year CPI average, cost of living, inflation, whatever you want to call it. So that's just on the base, but that is on your fiscal lease year, when your lease started, or when your rent started. It depends on what's been negotiated.
Okay. When you have a buyer, let's just take a small business, right? I mean, this building's a small building. It's not a big building, but let's just take somebody who is going to, let's say, lease a building like this, and they come in and they have you representing them as a buyer. What are you trying to be aware of for the buyer when you are talking about whether this space is suitable for their needs? What are you looking for to save them from some potential issues in the future?
Sure. And this is for the tenant.
You're for the buyer. You're representing the buyer.
But somebody who's leasing the space.
He is going to lease this space.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's and kind of backing up a little bit, I work with a new client, and they have this business and they want a space. We look at zoning. Zoning is a big thing, and every city, every municipality is different in how their zonings work. Some uses are kind of no-brainers where they can go. Some are tricky, and where they can go. So we look at zoning first. Okay, here we can be in this district in this city, and then we look at what's available. And so, first off, we want to make sure we're not going to run into any hiccups with the city, which is the use. And as we move forward from there, is looking at the market, seeing where the lease rates are, making sure it fits in their budget. That's one of my first questions I ask. What's our budget?
Right.
Where are we? And it's not about a matter of what somebody can afford. It's what makes sense for their business. There's nothing to do with what they can afford. They can afford more. If it doesn't make sense for the business, it doesn't make sense. So we look at that, and then we narrow it down to opportunity. And then the dance begins. We find opportunities and we start negotiating. And with leases, Jay, there are so many items to negotiate that may not be presented if someone is doing this on their own. And you have the basics. You have your lease rate and your term. You have we've talked about lease rates. Your term is typically 5 years. 5 years is kind of a market standard term. Sometimes we'll say 3, sometimes 7, sometimes 10, sometimes longer. 5 is kind of the middle spot where everything starts. And if a tenant is expecting the landlord to throw any money at it, say upfit allowance or so forth, even paint and carpet or anything,
right,
more likely that landlord is going to expect a 5-year just to recoup some of those dollars.
Got it.
3 years or less, it's as is. If the landlord would have entertained it, it's as is. It's whatever, what you see, what you get. And then one thing that had to be aware of is try not to go too long, and it's not just because of a business surviving or not, it's a growth trajectory. They might outgrow the space. Now, the majority of leases have a sublease clause in it where a tenant can sublease it to a business as long as the landlord approves who it is. But that doesn't mean it's automatically going to happen. It's kind of an out clause that could potentially happen. So we try to do it at a reasonable time that fits their growth trajectory. However, also having renewal options in it that gets forgotten quite a bit, where we can renew the lease for another 5 years or another 5 years at certain parameters based on the rate. So
you talked about there's negotiables, and so I think I've heard is a couple negotiables that you've kind of talked through. One is term is negotiable, right? The renewal, negotiable. Who's going to do the upfit? Probably is somewhat negotiable, because you tied it to the length of time you're going to do the lease. What are some of the other negotiables in leasing that maybe somebody is not thinking of, in terms of, okay, you need to be aware of this is negotiable or this isn't negotiable. So what are some other negotiables?
There's oftentimes we see this more in retail spaces where a personal guarantee may be required from the tenant, particularly if the landlord's coming in with a lot of money to upfit the space. But we see it more in retail where the landlord's just requiring that individual to personally guarantee the lease.
Mhm.
I'll tell a story, names excluded, where I was showing space years ago, showing space to someone, and they said, because I knew they leased space across town. I said, when does your lease end there? Just so we had the timing right. And they said, well, I still have a couple years left on that lease, but I'm going to bankrupt my corporation so I can get out of that lease
What?
and move here, just like you and I are talking right now. And of course, I called my landlord client. And I said, we're not doing this because this is not a tenant that you want in your, to partner with. I really see tenants and landlords as partners.
Right.
When they're done on the opposite sides of the table, they're partners. If one doesn't succeed, the other doesn't. So it's not a partner that he needed. That is one of the reasons why personal guarantees exist. As a small business owner, I remember getting into the business. Somebody once said, comparing it to residential, I think I like commercial better because there's not emotion in it
Right.
compared to residential. I've learned that that's anything but the case.
There's emotion.
Yeah.
Listen, as a psychological professional, I just want to tell you something. I don't care what purchase you make. There is emotion involved here because it is money, and money's emotional.
Well, it is. And even beyond that, and particularly there's two ways to look at it. With a small business owner, that's their baby.
Right.
At one point, their dining room table was full of applications,
Right.
forms, all these things to make this dream work.
Right.
That goes back to my earlier point of this being a permanent thing. They want it to succeed. At some point, they may sell it, but they want it to succeed. It's not a temporary thing. So it's their baby to make it happen. So it's important. If it's a large company and somebody's been put in charge of finding space, okay, this is their job. I was in that role. That's what first exposed me to commercial real estate. I worked at IBM,
right,
and we were looking for space off campus, and I was put in charge of it, and I needed to make it happen. So there's emotion there, of course, just because it's your job. So there's high emotion with it. And so with all that said, if somebody's business, say, isn't doing well, a small business owner, they're throwing all their money at it just to make it happen.
right, right.
So if in the unfortunate event that the business, they just can't do things, landlord in many ways just knows it's what we call blood out of a turnip, at a certain point. Not saying they won't pursue a guarantee, but it's there in the event they need to.
So that's something to negotiate then. Is that I guess it's called a guarantee. Personal guarantee.
So there's ways to negotiate it for length of time, the cap amount. There's different ways to negotiate that.
All right. What's another big thing that's negotiable that maybe people don't know in commercial risk?
It's one thing, and again, this kind of goes back to retail. Maybe some industrial thing could be the use and just being having a non-compete. If you're a certain restaurant or you're this and you want to be in the center, we want to be the only one that serves this. So we want to non-compete. We don't want anybody else in this center that does what we do.
So I could see that if you're a restaurant, let's say you're an Italian restaurant, right? And you and I like Italian food a lot. And
I eat too many breadsticks.
Yeah, it's wait, the garlic is delicious. The bread's good too. But I could see if you were in a walking mall, right, where you've got maybe a half dozen businesses in front and you're a restaurant, you want to be the only restaurant in those six places. I could see that. Right. I would think that would be the same thing if you were a jeweler. You want to be the only jeweler. You don't want to be competing against another jeweler who's 2 doors down from you, right? I can see that as well. So that is a negotiating piece that people, I'm sure, don't think about. Is there anything else in the leasing part that maybe when it comes to negotiation that
even on the office side, parking is a big thing, where your typical parking ratio is 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Sometimes we might need a little bit more. Sometimes even we might have after hours HVAC. These buildings, they don't shut down typically nowadays. They ratchet down their HVAC, but we need after hours HVAC. There are many items and where it comes to negotiating.
Well, and I think the big point here is for people, and I hope you're really paying attention to this, is that when you try to lease a space, it's not as simple as finding what you think is the right space and think you just sign the lease and you move on. There's things to negotiate. And if you don't have a professional doing this, you're leaving yourself wide open to actually probably spending more money than you probably should have, right? Because you didn't negotiate. You could be in a bad lease and when I say that, I don't mean bad in terms of that they did you wrong, but that you didn't negotiate terms that made sense for your business. Because I think you make that point is, does this make sense for your business? The issue of who's doing the upfitting.
Well, and per that point, there's negotiations which come to how long, let's say the tenant's doing it, how long do I have to do the upfitting? And that's going to be based on municipality, because some municipalities are better than others.
Right.
And I say that respectfully of all of them, but just when it comes to just inspections and how long quickly they can turn it around. And then the critical thing there is when the rent starts. That's the critical part is, so you have rent abatement period, which obviously is another thing we can negotiate. And then your upfit period, which typically those, Jay, are done outside of the term. So let's say it's a 5-year lease. Those periods, whatever they are typically outside of term. So let's say it's a couple months of rent abatement. We got 6 months of the upfit, which is kind of long, but 6 months. Then it'll be a 5 years, 8-month term. That's just that way. The landlord's still getting 5 years worth of rent to recoup, and they're in the business themselves. They're in the business to make money too. And the tenant's got time to do their upfit. Now with these, like going just back to the lease, it's not something to sign and then 5 years later we open it up again and figure out what we're doing. That's a very much a fluid document that needs to pay attention to. So I know we basically, every time we get a lease done, we put in the critical dates. So we know, because the thing is, when I work with a business owner, their top priority is run their business.
Yeah.
Their second priority in a transition is their real estate. It's always second.
Yeah.
It might be really close or it might be down here, but it's always second. It should be always second. So when we have these items, like every year they need to renew their liability insurance. That needs to be done every year, which that's going to adjust based on their insurance policy and when they signed on. And then every year, like we talked about, their rent goes up, or they may have a notice. This happens quite a bit where they have a notice like, okay, if you're going to renew, you have to let us know, landlord know, in 6 months prior. If you don't, you can't.
Right.
Your rights are gone. Those things. So those are negotiable items as well that are critical, just to have the lease always front of mind.
It's interesting because you remind me of a situation I'm currently dealing with. I have a coaching client in California, and she owns a very successful restaurant, farm-to-table restaurant in California, and she's in the midst of purchasing a larger building where she's going to put a little restaurant there, but then there's going to be a bakery and a yoga studio, and it's a big, huge building that she's going to have a number of things in. And so you talked about partnerships with the landlord. So her commercial broker and her were doing the deal together, and it was going to be this upfit was the issue. Well, the landlord said, well, we will, I will give you X number of months. And it was going to be a little longer because it was quite a bit of upfit. So it was going to be a lot of changes because they had to add water and places that weren't water and extra bathrooms and things like that. So they gave her 6 months. The landlord recommended the people who were going to who would do the upfit for her. Right. And she said, because I really didn't know. And so the landlord said, they'll do the upfit. Well, it's taken longer than 6 months. Okay. Now, fortunately for her, the landlord, since he was the one who was kind of helping with the upfit, has had to bite the bullet and say, I recommended these people. I said I was going to do this portion of it. Sure. They're not getting it done.
Sure.
And then inspections are taking longer because with every time, anytime you do anything electrical, anytime you do anything water, you got to have inspections.
Right.
And I'm not fully acquainted with California, but what I'm told in California is it's really a lot of inspections is what I'm told. And there's a lot of stuff going on there that they're like environmentally, and anything they change becomes a problem. So now the landlord's not getting paid. We're in month 9 because they're still upfit, right?
Sure.
So there is clearly some negotiation and I think it also, I'm guessing from your perspective as a commercial broker, it's kind of knowing who that landlord is and how flexible they will be. Whereas somebody who doesn't have that information could put themselves in peril because they might agree to something that they don't know is some flexibility there. Do you run across that?
I do. And Jay, what's critical is communication between the tenant and the landlord. And not necessarily right in the middle of a mix of a situation like that, but just in general. And for the landlord, checking in on the tenants, how you doing? Just want to make sure everything's good. If you think about it, just fundamental capitalism, who's paying who money is the customer, right? So in that partnership, the tenant is the customer, right? So there's a give and take a lot with that partnership, with that relationship, but that's who the customer is. Just fun to go down to fundamentals. So the landlord just checking in, just see how they're doing. And I advise this with some of my tenant clients is just periodically call the landlord or call the property management company, just say how well things are doing. Because usually all they hear are complaints. That's all they hear. Just periodically just say, I want to appreciate the opportunity. We're doing great. Just wanted to say hello. And at the end of the day, because I've situations where some client tenants, there's just complaints after complaints after complaints. Some are warranted, some maybe not. And if there's an issue down the road, landlord may not be very flexible. They may just say, well, I don't have to because the lease doesn't say I have to. But in that situation, so kudos to her first for having a commercial realtor to help her out. But they maintain that communication, and kudos to the landlord for really viewing that as a partnership and say, look, I understand. And she, I'm sure, has communicated along the way where things stand. So she's doing the best she can do to move it as quickly as she can. And I mean, I've had situations like that where I've talked to some landlord clients and I said, look, it's kind of a situation beyond everybody's control, but let's just see if we can make something work. It just makes it move forward.
I think the thing that's tricky about, and we listed a lot of things, is that tricky about the leasing aspect of commercial real estate is that there is just so much that we don't know when you try to walk into this on your own. And it's just inadvisable for you to try to negotiate all this because you don't know all the terminology, because you threw out a bunch of terms. You don't know all the terminology. You also don't necessarily understand what you can negotiate, right? And then your commercial realtor generally knows the tenant or knows information about the tenant, about how flexible they may be. Because as you said, this is a partnership. Because the tenant is the owner of this is not your adversary. He or she wants to have somebody in that space.
Sure.
Right? And you want a space to do your business. They want to make this work because vacancy doesn't work for them. Right?
Very true.
Right?
Very true. Yep.
And this is what's very different about residential, I think, than commercial, is there is more cooperation between owner and tenant simply because they're trying to provide a win-win both sides. I don't want vacancy. I want you in. I will do what I got to do to try to accommodate you. We can negotiate those terms. You want a space because you want your business to grow. And by the way, I want your business to grow too, because if you're here for 5, I don't want you to go under. Because if we sign a 5 or a 7 or a 10, I want you to be successful because there's nothing better for me as an owner of a commercial building to say that my tenant says, oh no, I'm going to be here for 10 years and you don't have to worry about that tenant for 10 years.
Well, and it's compared to just about anything, not even real estate in life that we negotiate. We're buying a vehicle, or we're just name what it is. You negotiate with the other party, you move on, go separate ways. This is negotiating a long-term relationship. So, and also it is, is it somebody, just like the story I shared before, is it somebody you really want a long-term relationship with?
Right. So let's move to commercial purchases here. And I think people treat commercial purchases oftentimes like trying to purchase a house, and it's not the same thing. When you're representing a buyer in a commercial purchase, what's your mentality? What's your mind switch that you're doing now as somebody who's going to try to find a permanent space or something that they're going to own? What's the mind switch there, and what do they need to know?
What I start with, Jay, and the most critical item is they are now wearing two hats. This property they're buying needs to work for their business, of course. It's also an investment, as just whether or not it worked for their business or not, is it just generally a good investment in terms of the value, the dollar amount, of course. Is it in an area that's growing? Is it constructed in a way that just might be more pliable and flexible for different uses down the way? And that's challenging because, business owner, as they should, they're going in from the mindset, this will work perfect or not for my business. But at some point, they'll sell their business. It'll happen, at some point that happens, or at some point they may just decide, okay, I'm done with this and I'm moving to the beach and I'm going to lease it out. Well, is this a property that I can lease out for them? Is it? And lease out for a number that just makes sense based on what they bought it for. I've had the pleasure, and it kind of reminds me of how long I've been in the industry, over 20 years, where I've worked with clients that I helped them lease their first space and then buy it and then build it and then lease out to other folks. And then they've sold their business, they've moved on, but they maintain ownership, and then maybe they sold the business, sold the property. So it's a great opportunity through that growth trajectory, if that is their mindset of their future, where they can be in the building and then lease out space as just getting income. It's retirement. And many banks look very favorable to what we call owner-occupied real estate. And so they love that because they know that, here's my opinion, is if a building owner, they have their business in it, they are going to look after that property a bit more. They're going to protect it, and they're going to pay their mortgage, essentially. So, but you have other business in there, and then where, like, I have a few listings now where that's the case, and it's a lot about just having the right synergy because they're cohabitating with their tenants. And those uses need to be critical for their own business success. So those are all items that we look at if it's a multi-tenant property, like your friend in California.
Sure.
So if it's multi-tenant, so if there's some properties that can be built in a way that's just extremely selective to a particular use, might be more challenging for later. All of those we look at, all of those factors we look at.
So, okay, we own this building here. We purchased this building here. When you think, and it's great location, right? I mean, it's a bit. I mean, Six Forks Road here in Raleigh is busy. I don't know how many tens of thousands of people run up and down this road a day, but it's a lot. I think it's close to 60,000 or something like that, maybe more now, with how much we've grown. And so there was a lot of good things. Again, I think you have to know what you can actually use it for.
Sure. Right.
There's zoning.
Goes back to the zoning.
Goes back to zoning. So, we had to make sure that we could run an office out of here.
Sure.
When we did this building, of course, it was when interest rates were really, really low, and we were able to get in pretty easily and do this whole thing. And I think you're right that the bank looked much more favorably because we owned it.
Sure.
And it was our business that was going to be in here, and that we were going to upgrade it and and keep it and do what we were going to do with it. So I think they were much more favorable towards us over that piece.
Mhm.
When you go in and you see, and let's just take, we we wanted to buy a building for our own real estate office.
Mhm.
Let's take that example. And you represent us, right? Because we're looking to make a purchase and do this building. Is there something that you would set up in the first appointment when we meet with you where you go, okay, here's where we're going to negotiate, or here's what I want you to pay close attention to from your standpoint to make sure this really works? What are some of the things you do in your first consult if you were in that situation?
So again, it's kind of like a funnel where basically we're looking, and this is if we were looking also just generally at opportunities across the area, what the zoning works, what just works for us. And I work basically with a scorecard, and depends on what's critical to my client. Visibility might be, it's always a good thing to have, but sometimes it's more critical than others. Does it match the culture? We all know the hiring and staffing is a major challenge these days. Does it match the culture for having people come back into the office, which is the trend? That's a whole other episode we can talk about.
Right.
Yeah, but having people come in. Is it a place in your instance where clients feel comfortable coming if they're going to come to you to have a meeting? Is it a good area? Now, does the price match what the space can lease for? So one thing we look at is cap rates. And so we say, okay, it can lease for this. This is market. This is the purchase price. So let's say you were buying an investment property. It was leased out to a tenant already. We look at that, and it's basically just a snapshot view of what your return on investment is. It's $1 million property. You paid $1 million for it. You're getting $80,000 worth of net operating income. That's 8% cap rate. It's a snapshot view of your return on investment. But we look at that, however, even if it's owner occupied. So like say in this instance, and CPAs like this, is when the tenant in their own building that is a certain corporation name, the ownership is a LLC. So you have some separation there, attorneys like that. And so, but then the corporation leases it from the LLC.
Right.
And even has a document that says that. So you've got the money from Peter to Paul and you can do your expenses correct, but it needs to be market. And so, but we look at that out the gate. So we say, okay, this space would lease for X. And if you bought it for Y, because what you have to look at, and there's always life. And the one thing I look at too, there's always kind of life changes, things happen, and being prepared. So if there was an instance where you needed to lease out this building, do the numbers make sense for what you paid for it?
Right. Is there something in particular that you run into with a new buyer, like first time buyer of commercial real estate? Is there something that you run into where they're surprised that they didn't know, that they go, oh, well, I'm glad I got you here, Baxter, because I would have not known that had you not been here. Is there something that you see that's pretty common in terms of what they get surprised by?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What is that? The answer is yes. Okay. What is that?
So there's, one fundamental thing is the difference of the financing between if somebody's buying a house versus somebody buying a commercial property. And generally, if somebody's looking to buy or even lease, there's a handful of folks who are going to call first. The residential realtor, they're going to call first and ask if either they can do it or if they can advise somebody. That's a big point of contact. Their bank, if they can get money, their financial advisor, if they should do it, their attorney, if they know somebody, their CPA, if they know somebody. So if I'm the first point of contact or one of the first, that is one of the first conversations is just how financing works. And typically in commercial financing, your typical loan arrangement is a 20-year amortization. But here's the catch, is maybe a 5-year balloon. So your rate is protected for 5 years. And after the 5 years, the bank will reevaluate it. Now, there's a lot of other terms based on the initial rate as to how much the bank can change the rate after 5 years, how long that balloon might be, a 7-year, might be a 10-year balloon. But and part of the reason for this, Jay, is commercial properties are so, the valuation of commercial properties is so temperamental and based on so many factors. That's, typically a commercial appraisal could be $3,000 to $4,000 compared to a residential appraisal, just because there's so many factors that come into play, leases and just the whole, how's that sector, retail, office, whatever, how's that sector doing, all those factors. And so because of that, the bank wants a chance to we just need to reevaluate this, after a certain number of years, which more oftentimes than not, it's not an issue. They renew it, but every now and then, let's just say, when we went through the 08, 09 situation, many banks said, we're not doing land anymore. And so they some clients had land finance. The bank said, no, sorry, we're out. That was a very unique situation, but it is one of those things. And also a big factor is how much they expect down, and which could be 20% down to buy a commercial property. There's SBA financing. I'm stretching into a segment that's I very quickly point them to whoever their chosen lender is to take it from there. But certain SBA financing that could help reduce the amount of money down. So it is just one of those factors to quickly get their arms around, just to make sure it's doable.
You opened up a can of worms for me here when you said something here, and I know I want to keep you in your lane, but at the same time, I'm sure you run across it. Are there? You talked about SBA, small business programs that are out there. In the residential world, people have all sorts of things that they use that they can get people into a home. Are there some programs like the small business or anything that people can get into that you are aware of that you have used in your career?
There are, and there are different banks that have different programs that do it. That is really more bank particular, and some have particular SBA programs. Some might outsource that. So and that's really kind of diving in deep to their thing. And one thing too on the buying side is working a lot with people looking to land to build something. That creates a whole interesting dynamic of timelines, where when we put land under contract. So a land contract, and this depends on the municipality, and this goes into financing too. So I'm bridging that over to this side. Is, some municipality might take 6 months. Some municipalities around here on name might take 12 months to do. So it's about a matter of knowing that and how long we as the buyer of land to make sure our use will get approved and our site plan will get approved, which is basically the building and the driveway and the parking and all that stuff. If you're looking at it from up at top, that we have ample time to do that. And so there'll typically be a bit of what we call a free look period. But then after that, it's more contingency periods based on if the municipality approves it.
Got it.
So, but those are exciting. They take longer, they're longer transactions, but it's exciting for me that's when I'm able to work with a client that gets to that point, it's been a big dream of theirs to build their own building for their use. They could be building at spec, but we'll keep the owner occupied subject on the top here. Is this has been a dream of theirs, and it's just to be a part of that. That's kind of the goosebump thing. It's to be a part of that and help them and guide them to build the right thing in the right area, get the right tenant mix is what's critical, and then have ample time. And then I help them interview contractors that can build it and that can perform, how they need to perform. And I'm with them every step of the way.
This has been fun. I've really, and so informative. Clearly, folks, you've been watching. Thanks for everybody who's been watching, by the way. Clearly, what we've all learned today is there is no such thing as DIY commercial real estate purchasing. Okay. We're going to have you come back, another show and do the seller side. Sure. We're going to have to do the seller side. because we have not talked about sellers. We did everything in terms of buyer leasing, buyers purchases. Just such great information. I'm always grateful when you come on my show and
thank you.
And do this, because it's always so much fun, and I always love seeing you in your new boots.
I had to step on my boot game to keep up with you, Jay.
Keep up with my boot game. Well, you know what that does to me? That makes Linda unhappy, because she knows that I'm gonna have to go get a pair of boots to top you.
Sorry, Linda.
Okay. So much fun, man. Tell people how they can get a hold of you. You're interested in doing commercial real estate. Here's your guide.
Thank you again, Baxter Walker with Avis & Young. Give out my cell. It's 919-606-3319.
It's 919-606-3319. You know, in radio and in TV, they say you're supposed to do the phone number 3 times. So 919-606-3319, Baxter Walker. Is there an email that people can reach you to?
I learned another trick too, and I'll tell you in a second.
Okay.
It's Baxter.Walker. I wonder how many people think my middle name is Dot, but it's actually the period. Baxter.Walker@avisandyoung.com. That's AVISONYOUNG. And I try not to sing that like the Mickey Mouse, because it kind of sounds like the Mickey Mouse.
Oh, it does.
AVISONYOUNG. Anyway, so yeah, my dad told me this is, I say 3319. You just had to remember 2 numbers and not 4.
You know, it's really true. I would go into the psychology of that, but I don't think people want to hear that at all.
Another episode.
Thanks,
thanks,
Baxter. Hey, folks, this show, you know what I say to you every week, you had a lot of choices. You chose us. Thank you so much for doing that. We're always grateful. Give us a thumbs up on YouTube, wherever you listen to this show. Would you please give us a 5-star review and encourage us? It does, and it also helps us to grow the show. Tell your friends. We really do appreciate it. We are very grateful for you. We're thankful for you. And as I say to you all over the world, you know what that is? And that is ciao, everybody. Oh no, where's my mouse? There it is.